Okay, so you want to get right to the heart of things, yeah. Understand something important, but without, getting totally bogged down in details.
Hmm.
That's what we're aiming for today. We're doing a deep dive into project management formulas.
Now, hold on. I know what you might be thinking. Formulas. Sounds maybe a bit dry.
Yeah, but trust us, we've got this key document. It's called List of All Formulas Used in PMP.pdf.
Right. And our mission really is to pull out the ones that really matter, the ones that tell you the story of your project's health.
Exactly. We want to show you what they reveal about performance, efficiency, how things are actually going. It's not about memorizing, it's about understanding.
Think of it as a shortcut. Understanding the project's vital signs. We'll hit the big ones: earned value, scheduling, procurement, even things like communication and risk.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with earned value management, EVM. This is kind of the cornerstone for tracking performance against the plan, right?
Absolutely. It really hinges on understanding a few core values first. You've got plan value, PV.
Planned value. So what's the essence of PV?
It's basically the budgeted cost for the work that was scheduled to be done by a certain point. Think of it as your plan in dollars up to now.
Okay, so what we plan to spend on what we plan to do makes sense. Then there's earned value, EV. How's that different?
Right. So earned value, or EV, is the value of the work that's actually been completed, measured against the budget. So it's the real progress you've made, expressed in cost terms.
Gotcha. So PV is the plan, EV is the actual work done value.
Precisely. And then you have actual cost, AC. That one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, just what you actually spent, right? The real money out the door.
Exactly. And the last piece of the foundation is the budget at completion, or BAC. That's just the total planned budget for the whole project, start to finish.
Okay, plan, earned value, actual spend, total budget. Got it. Now, the interesting part is comparing these, right? The variances. Cost variance, CV, that's EV minus AC.
Correct. EV minus AC. And what that tells you is pretty crucial if it's positive.
Positive CV means you've earned more value than you've spent. So, under budget for the work done.
You got it. Good news. And negative.
Negative CV means you spent more than the value you earned over budget. Uh-oh.
Yep. Could be issues with costs, resources, anything. Then you have schedule variance, SV. That's EV minus PV.
Right. So comparing the value earned to the value planned, what does that show?
Well, if SV is positive, you've completed more work value than planned for this point in time. You're ahead of schedule.
Nice. And negative SV.
Behind schedule, you haven't accomplished as much work, value-wise, as you planned to by now. These variances, they're like your dashboard indicators, red flashing lights or steady green.
Totally. Okay, so variances tell us if we're off. What about how much we're off efficiency-wise? That's the indices, right? CPI and SPI.
Exactly. Cost performance index, CPI, that's earned value divided by actual cost. EVAC.
EV over AC. So what's the magic number there?
1. A CPI greater than 1 means you're getting more than $1 worth of value for every dollar you spend. Very efficient.
And less than 1.
Less than 1 means you're spending more than the value you're getting back. Cost inefficiency, maybe your developers are taking longer, or materials cost more than expected.
Okay. And schedule performance index, SPI. That's EV divided by PV.
Yep. EVPV. Similar logic. SPI greater than 1.
You're working faster than planned, getting more done than scheduled, ahead of the game, efficiency-wise.
Perfect. And less than 1 means you're working slower than planned. Behind schedule pace. Like if that construction foundation work has an SPI of 0.8, you know you're lagging.
Right. Okay, so that tells us where we are and how efficiently we got here. But what about looking ahead? Forecasting. That's estimated completion EAC, isn't it? There are a few ways to calculate that.
Yes, several ways, depending on your assumptions about future performance. The most common one is EAC equals BAC CPI.
BAC divided by CPI. So you're basically saying...
We're assuming the cost efficiency or inefficiency you've seen so far. It's probably going to continue for the rest of the project. It's often the default if things seem stable.
Okay, assumes the past, predicts the future. What's another way?
Another common one is EAC equals AC plus BAC EV. Actual cost so far plus the remaining budget value of work.
AC plus BAC minus EV. When would you use that one?
You might use that if you think whatever caused your past cost performance, say a one-time problem, is fixed now. You expect the remaining work to proceed according to the original budget rate. It's saying, okay, that past variance was an anomaly.
Got it. Atypical performance won't continue. And there's a third main option.
Yeah, EAC plus bottom-up ETC. So actual cost plus a brand new detailed estimate for all the remaining work. The estimate to complete, or ETC, is recalculated from scratch.
Ah, so you basically throw out the old plan for the remaining work and re-estimate everything. That sounds like more work.
It is. You do this if things have changed significantly, maybe the scope changed or the initial estimates are just way off. You need a fundamental replan. The key is picking the EAC formula that matches your project's reality and your assumptions.
Okay, makes sense. And once you have that EAC, the forecast for the total cost, you can figure out the estimate to complete, ETC.
Right. ETC is just EAC minus AC. Your best guess at how much more money you'll need to spend from this point forward.
EAC minus AC. Simple enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that lets you calculate the final variance at completion, the AC.
Exactly. VAC equals BAC. Your original total budget minus your new forecasted total cost tells you if you're projected to finish under or over budget overall.
BAC minus EAC. Okay. That gives the final projected outcome. Phew, lots of acronyms there.
There are. It helps sometimes. Well, there's a little mnemonic for the variances. EV comes at a cost. EV for earned value, AC for actual cost, and the cost variance is EV minus AC.
EV comes at a cost.
Nice. But really, the best way to get comfortable is to practice, work through some examples. And just a tip, if you're ever looking at certifications, knowing when to use which EAC formula is definitely something they like to test.
Good tip. Okay, so that's a solid look at the financial and progress tracking side with EVM. Let's shift gears slightly. What about just managing the timeline itself? Critical path stuff.
Right, the critical path method, CPM. Super important for understanding your project's duration and schedule flexibility.
The core idea is the critical path itself, yeah.
Absolutely. It's that specific sequence of tasks from start to finish that determines the absolute shortest possible time the project can take. But to find it, you need to understand float, or sometimes called slack.
Float or slack, that's the wiggle room, right?
Exactly. It's the amount of time a specific task can be delayed without delaying the project's overall end date. The formula is float, late start, early start, or you can use late finish, early finish. Gives the same number.
LS minus ES, or LF minus EF.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So tasks not on the critical path have float.
Correct. They have some buffer, but the tasks on the critical path.
They have zero float. Any delay there pushes the whole project back.
Precisely. That's why identifying it is so, critical. You know where you absolutely cannot afford delays.
Makes sense. I saw something about calculating the number of paths, too.
Yeah. That's more for complex schedules. If you have points where the path splits and then rejoins, you multiply the number of parallel path options at each stage to get the total number of possible paths through the network. It just highlights how complex dependencies can get.
Okay. Now, what about estimating durations when things are uncertain? I think that's where PERT comes in.
Yes, PERT, Program Evaluation and Review Technique. Especially useful when you don't have firm historical data for task durations. You use 3 estimates.
3 estimates.
Yeah. Optimistic O, pessimistic P, and most likely M. The PERT formula for the expected duration, often called TE, is O plus 4M plus P6.
O plus 4M plus P6. So it's a weighted average, heavily leaning toward the most likely estimate?
Exactly. It statistically accounts for the uncertainty or risk in the estimate, giving you a more realistic duration than just picking one number.
And PERT also gives you a way to measure that uncertainty, doesn't it? Like the standard deviation.
It does. The standard deviation, SD, for a PERT estimate is PO6, pessimistic minus optimistic divided by 6.
PO6. So a bigger gap between best and worst case means a bigger standard deviation, more uncertainty.
Right. And knowing the standard deviation lets you calculate a probability range. For example, the expected duration, TE plus or minus 1, standard deviation, TESD, gives you roughly a 68% confidence range for that task's duration, assuming a certain distribution.
Okay, so PERT helps estimate duration and the risk around that estimate. Very useful. Let's switch to getting stuff we need procurement. The make or buy decision seems fundamental.
It really is. Do we build this component ourselves or do we buy it from a supplier? It's not just cost, though. You're thinking about strategy, core skills, risk transfer, all sorts of things.
Right. But if we do decide to buy, especially with certain contract types, there are other calculations. I remember seeing something about the point of total assumption, PTA. Sounds ominous.
It can be, for the seller anyway. It applies specifically to fixed price incentive fee, FTIF, contracts.
FPIF. Okay, what is the PTA?
It's the cost point where the incentive structure of the contract effectively ends for the seller. Beyond the PTA, the seller absorbs 100% of any additional cost overruns. They bear all the risk past that point.
Ouch. So how do you calculate that point?
The formula is PTA, ceiling crate target price, buyer share ratio plus target cost.
Maybe let's break that down. Ceiling price minus target price, divided by the buyer share ratio, then add the target cost. What's the buyer share ratio?
That ratio defines how cost savings or overruns below the ceiling price but around the target cost are shared. For example, an 80-20 ratio might mean the buyer gets 80% of the savings if the cost is below target, but also pays 80% of the overrun above target, up to the ceiling. That ratio is key in the PTA calculation. Understanding PTA is vital when negotiating these FPIF contracts.
Definitely seems like something both sides need to watch closely. Okay, moving from contracts to people. Stakeholders. Communication complexity is a big deal, and there's a formula for that.
Yes, a simple but powerful one. The number of potential communication channels, I'll define N1, 2.
N times N minus 1 divided by 2, where N is.
The number of stakeholders, including the project manager.
So what does this show us?
It shows how quickly communication complexity increases as you add people. Go from 5 stakeholders to 10, the number of potential channels doesn't just double, it explodes.
Let's see, 5 people is 5, 4, 2 equals 10 channels. 10 people is 10, 9, 2, 2 is 45 channels.
Exactly. It really underscores why having a clear communication plan becomes exponentially more important on larger projects. You can't just wing it.
No kidding. Okay, what about managing the things that could go wrong? Risk management, expected monetary value, EMV.
EMV is a core concept for quantifying risk. The formula is simply EMV, probability x impact.
Probability times impact, where impact is usually money.
Often, yes. The financial consequence if the risk actually happens. So if there's a 20% chance, 0.2 probability of a risk occurring that would cost you $10,000 impact, the EMV is 0.2, $10,000, $2,000.
Okay, so it gives you a weighted value for that risk. How is that used?
It's heavily used in decision tree analysis. You map out different decision paths and chance events, calculate the EMV for each potential outcome, and it helps you choose the path that offers the best overall expected financial value, considering the risks involved. It helps make risk-based decisions more objective.
Got it. Quantifying the risk to help make choices. Now, related to cost and risk is how we budget for it. Reserves. There are 2 main types, right?
Yes, and it's crucial to understand the difference. You have contingency reserves and management reserves.
Okay, contingency reserve.
That's budget set aside for specific identified risks, things you think might happen, the known unknowns. It's calculated based on risk analysis, maybe using EMV, and it's part of the project's cost baseline. The project manager usually has authority to use this reserve when those identified risks occur.
So for risks you've anticipated, like maybe a key supplier might be late, so you put some contingency aside for that.
Exactly. Then there's management reserve.
And
That's for the completely unforeseen stuff. The risks you didn't identify, the unknown unknowns. It's not tied to specific risks, but is there for genuine surprises. Crucially, it's not part of the cost baseline.
Not in the baseline. So who controls that?
Senior management, typically. The project manager needs formal approval to access management reserves. It's a buffer for things completely outside the project team's initial planning horizon.
Okay, contingency for known unknowns within the baseline, management for unknown unknowns outside the baseline. Clear distinction. Shifting back to the big picture, how do we even know if a project is worth doing? Benefit measurement and ROI stuff.
Right. Before you even calculate EVM, you need to justify the project. Several metrics help here. Return on investment, ROI is a big one.
ROI, that's benefit cost, right?
Yep, benefit cost. Cost, usually shown as a percentage, tells you how much return you expect for your investment. Higher is generally better.
Okay. What else? Payback period.
Payback period. Simply the time it takes for the project's accumulated benefits to equal the initial investment cost. Shorter payback is often preferred, as it means you recoup your investment faster. Less risk sometimes.
Makes sense. Then the more complex ones. Net present value, NPV.
NPV. This accounts for the time value of money, the idea that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. It calculates the present value of all the future cash inflows the project will generate, minus the present value of the outflows costs.
So it brings all future money back to today's value.
Exactly. A positive NPV generally means the project is expected to generate more value than it costs, considering the time value of money and a specific discount rate. Higher positive NPV is better.
Okay. And internal rate of return, IRR.
IRR is related to NTV. It's the specific discount rate at which the project's NTV equals 0. Think of it as the project's inherent rate of return. You usually compare the IRR to your organization's required rate of return or hurdle rate. If the IRR is higher, the project looks attractive.
So NPV gives a dollar value, IRR gives a percentage rate.
Correct. And one more common one is the benefit cost ratio, BCR.
ECR.
Simply the present value of the benefits divided by the present value of the costs. benefit cost. If BCR is greater than 1, the benefits outweigh the costs. Less than 1, the costs outweigh the benefits.
Benefit over cost. Greater than 1 is good. Lots of ways to slice the financial justification. Okay, one last key formula area. The To Complete Performance Index, TCPI. This sounds like it's about finishing strong.
It is. It's a forward-looking indicator. It tells you the cost performance efficiency that you must achieve on the remaining work to meet a specific financial goal, either the original budget, BAC, or the revised forecast, EAC.
Okay, so how do you calculate it? There are two versions.
Yes. The first version is used if you're aiming to finish within the original budget, the BAC. The formula is TCPI, BAC-EV, BAC-AC.
BAC minus EV, divided by BAC minus AC. What does that numerator and denominator represent?
The numerator, BAC-EV, is the value of the work remaining. The denominator, BAC-AC, is the amount of money remaining in the original budget. So it's the ratio of remaining work to remaining budget.
Ah, okay. The required efficiency needed on the rest of the work to hit the original target. What if that target is no longer realistic?
Right. If you've accepted a new forecast, the estimate at completion, EAC, then you calculate TCPI based on that. The formula becomes TCPI, BAC-EV.
EAC-AC.
AC minus EV divided by EAC minus AC. The remaining work stays the same in the numerator, but the denominator changes.
Exactly. Now, the denominator, EAC-AC, is the amount of money actually remaining based on your new forecast. So this version tells you the efficiency needed to meet that revised EAC.
So TCPI essentially tells you how hard you need to work, efficiency-wise, for the rest of the project. A TCPI greater than 1 means you need to be more efficient than you have been so far.
Precisely. If your past CPI was, say, 0.9, but your TCPI comes out as 1.1, it's a warning sign. You need a significant improvement in cost efficiency to meet your target. If it's less than 1, you actually have some room. You can be slightly less efficient than you were previously. That's a really powerful indicator for the team and management. Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground there, from planning and tracking to forecasting and justification.
We have. And the key takeaway really is that these aren't just numbers for reports. They are diagnostic tools. They help you ask the right questions, spot trouble early, and make informed decisions throughout the project lifecycle.
And hopefully, for you listening, getting a clearer picture of these core formulas gives you like a decoder ring for project performance, a way to quickly grasp the health and trajectory of projects you're involved in or overseeing.
Which leads to maybe a final thought to chew on. Imagine if organizations consistently use these formulas not just for calculation, but for genuine understanding and proactive management. How much could that shift project outcomes?
Yeah, could that consistent focus on what the numbers mean, rather than just generating them, fundamentally change the approach to risk, to planning, maybe even boost success rates significantly?
Something to consider. How that deeper practical application could really elevate project delivery.